Hi, it's John here with another Indie Creative Entrepreneur's Journey. And this time I've got indie author Aaron Kennedy, who's going to talk about writing his first series, but more importantly, how he's kind of basically taken the motivation from helping a cause. But before we dive into like writing and your journey with doing that, Aaron, maybe you could talk a little bit about what lights you up each day. What is it that kind of gets you going?
Well, the family is kind of the core group to begin with. You got to work to feed the family. You got to do that, and then you've got the morale aspects to keep everybody kind of happy. So right now, I work 3 miles from my house. I've got a great job. I've got a great wife. Been married for almost 17 years now. Next month.
Wow.
Yep. 16-year-old son. About ready to kick him out of the house. Let him find his own path. We do in the spring and the fall, we do marathon running season. I do about 10 halves a year, a couple marathons, type things. The writing, just had I did the book, of course, you mentioned that. I actually just had a article published with one of my writing partners, Jeff Yeager, Major Jeff Yeager, Army, in NCO Journal. We've got another one that's probably going to be coming out in the Army Times and shoot in the next couple days, and then I'm working on a third article on that in addition to the second book and things to that nature.
Wow. And you just came from a marathon down Florida, right?
Yep, just finished the Walt Disney World's Wine and Dine half marathon challenge. So a 10K one day and then a half marathon the following day. And then I've got Richmond in 2 days.
And so how was that? How was running down Florida?
Hot, very hot.
Yeah, it's still hot.
It starts at like 5 o'clock, so it's not too bad for the first hour, but
yeah, that humidity, like kind of, it's. I know people often joke about how it's a dry heat, and then down there in Florida, it's like total opposite. It's never dry heat there. So about the book itself. Like, what was it that kind of really started that journey? Like what was it like? I'm guessing that you're a fan. Just reading it, I get that sense that you're a fan of science fiction. So what was it that kind of like started creating the inspiration for Ships of Valor?
Ships of Valor, it started with a seed idea. And the seed idea was you've got this retired vet sitting in what is essentially an airport, and the first couple chapters, which don't exist in the production copy, were him in the airport and on the ship to Luna, basically on his way home, his journey home. As I went through the beta process, out those first couple chapters, but it all started with the concept of we're all on our way home at one point or another. You got out of the Navy, I got out of the Marine Corps, and when you walk out the door, you've got to go home at one point. There's a distinct exodus line as you're crossing that path or that barrier from your military life to your civilian life. So I've got this guy that's kind of just sitting there, and he's making that transitional journey.
Yeah, I could definitely see that home is a big theme in the story and stuff. But then certainly, of course, like the military elements, it's clear that you draw from your own experiences. Can you talk a little bit about that, about like kind of what was it that you were hoping to capture from your own experiences in the military?
Well, I mean, I only had about 8 years in the Marine Corps. I was a sergeant when I got out, on the verge of picking up staff sergeant, but I had to choose between the military and family. I chose family. But what I was looking at was it's a hard transition, going from one set to the other set. We always talk about the culture shock of joining the military. You're a civilian and then a military member. And it's really hard to talk about how you're no longer, when you get out of the military, you never become a civilian again. And a phrase I've used is we're foreigners in our own land. We speak the same language, sort of. We see the same people, but we've got all these idiosyncrasies that kind of pop up. The main character's book, he's going through these little things as he's being denied a goal. We're very mission oriented. We see something on the horizon and we just relentlessly pursue it until we're told, nope, you can't have that. You can't do that. And the level of frustration that kind of pops up is kind of one of the major themes of the book. As I tell people, it takes heavily from Odysseus. You got a guy that's just trying to get home, or what he thinks is home at that point.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the thing, like where home, is this idea, right? It's not necessarily a place, even though we tend to like having it be a place makes it more within reach, but then at the same time, because it's an idea, it's kind of never quite within our reach. Then I think it's like that's the kind of tension that, and I feel like you really achieve that in this world. And speaking of which, the world itself is like, I mean, I've read some different science fiction and stuff, but and I know that you said that you wanted to kind of keep it relatively short and stuff, but it's dense. The world is filled with like detail and stuff. So I'm guessing you didn't do this overnight. So can you talk a little bit about that as well, about like kind of how things have, like you took that seed of an idea, as you said, but then like it just seems like you put layers after layers of that kind of, like a pearl thing until it gave this sheen to the pearl.
Well, part of it's you draw from other things that are out there, and space is the human race's backup plan. If we're all located on planet Earth, something's going to happen. A meteor, something big enough, a comet, it's going to wipe us all out. So NASA's goal has always been get the human race to space, and then we've got twice the chance of survival. Where we go from Aerie begins his journey on Luna, and that's the first stepping stone outbound. So he's going, instead of going outbound, we're going inbound. We reverse it. The dense world is, I tried to keep everything logical, and my beta readers were very good about talking about that. And they said, okay, yes, it's a very logical, consistent world. But one of the big things that I tried to do was, I'm not hard sci-fi. You've got the various flavors of science fiction. I'm technically not even sci-fi if you, as you read the story, because I really don't talk about a whole lot of the science aspects of it. I tell a story that's roughly adventure, a little bit of intrigue. It's got themes that go along with it. And you'll notice that in the book, I never actually describe the main character. And I give minimal description because it's told from a first-person narrative. And just like if you were telling me a story, you would only tell me the things that you think are important, and I would fill in the gaps in my own head. And I kind of worked with that philosophy. So it creates a world that feels a lot denser than it is, because you, the reader, are just filling in the gaps. You've got this vision of what's going on. If I told you, please describe Aerie Gadsden, the main character thing, you'd be, wait a second, he only uses two descriptive terms. He says how tall he is at one point. He says what his weight is at one point, and he uses that in relation to two other people just to kind of give a comparison. And I thought it worked with the novel.
What would you say are like some kind of inspirations, or like where do you kind of draw from? Like kind of like, are there authors that you've really kind of felt like along the way that you got ideas from, and then were there other people that kind of like kind of encouraged you or nudged you onto writing itself? Beyond like kind of, because a lot of people have ideas that they want to write and stuff, but to actually do it, that's a whole nother another story.
I've been writing in a limited capacity, fiction writing, since I was a kid. You get the stories in your head. I've got a notebook. I've got notebooks upon notebooks full of ideas. In my drawer here, I've got two books that's probably 20,000 words each. So it's the first quarter of a book, if you will, that I just haven't moved forward on. This was the first kind of a seed of an idea that made the leap from concept through execution. One of my friends over on Rally Point, a guy named Greg Wright, I said, hey, do me a favor, take a look at this, see if we've got kind of a story going on here, see if it'll work. He got to read it through several interactions from the very first seed concept back in June of last year through the final beta draft, and he's got one of the first actual paperback versions of it. So he's seen it from start to end. You kind of just plug away at it. You put a couple thousand words here, a couple thousand words there. I always write 1,000, or I start the day going back. I edit what I wrote the day before, make it cleaner, and then pop in it and try to get a couple more thousand, 4 or 5 pages. As you said, it's not a big book. I kind of try to emulate that 1960s, 1970s pulp style book, and using this as an example, this is the size of the book in paperback form. It's about 370 pages, which isn't a small book. It's a lot denser than what people are now used to. Back in that era, we were talking, a couple hundred pages was a great book. But I wanted a distinct goal because I had to look at the marketing aspects of it as well as the creative aspects, and it's flipping that coin back and forth, which us to leadership and management. Sometimes you got to go from being a leader to a manager, and then back and forth, and sometimes they're in conflict, and sometimes they work in conjunction with each other. The production aspect and the marketing aspect of book writing is the same way.
So are there folks that also have inspired you in terms of the business aspect of this, like kind of making some of those decisions?
Quentin Tarantino, for one. And the reason I say that is he once said, I write the kind of movies and I make the kind of movies that I would like to watch. He doesn't worry about necessarily his audience. So I kind of took that kind of mindset. If I try to make a mass-produced something, I would end up with something I wouldn't like and something that a good portion of the populace wouldn't like. Whereas if I wrote something that I did like, and I think I got a good story, I'm not saying it's perfect or anything to that nature, but I got a story that sounds with certain people. Strangely enough, it hits certain demographics. A lot of women seem to like it just because of the undertones there. It's not fast-paced. It's got a nice, steady roller coaster, like a wooden roller coaster instead of a metal roller coaster. It's an upward climb. You hit the climax, and you back down to where you should be. And then men over the age of 35 seem to like it. Whereas you got that 18 to 25-year-old males absolutely hate it. They're like, it's slow. He talks a lot. What's going on here? Why are we doing this? Which is really interesting from a dynamic and a production standpoint.
So when you say some of these stats and all that, it's from basically the people who've like kind of been beta readers that's kind of giving you guys this feedback?
I went through 3 full rounds of beta readers with 3 or 4 people in each round. And then I've got the reviews either on Amazon, Goodreads, and a few other places that I'm picking apart. Plus, I've got friends that have read it outside of the beta reading process that I've talked to. And I looked at it and I go, okay, where did I miss the market here? Which were artistic choices that I wanted to maintain? In one of the first drafts, I had used, and not thinking about it, the female lead, which she's not in a whole lot of the book. Harry refers to women throughout the book in the draft as femmes. I didn't think anything of it. It was just kind of a flavor, kind of that 1950s calling them dames feel. One of my beta readers said, "Hey, you might want to watch this." I'm like, "Okay." And then one of my friend's daughter, she read it, says, "Hey, it makes him come off like, pardon my French, an asshole." I'm like, you know what? It didn't add enough to justify it. I removed it. So I've adjusted the story based on that because I get concurrent feedback.
So in terms of also, as you gotten this feedback and stuff, did it ever get to a point where you kind of like really, almost wanted to kind of turn around and like kind of, like just like, or was it even like kind of outside of the feedback and stuff, like, because sometimes during the writing process, it can be really a struggle, right? Like where you kind of like, the stories, it seemed like it was kind of moving along, that like you said, the railroad's kind of cruising, and then all of a sudden it just seemed to kind of come to a dead stop and stuff. Did you ever have a moment like that?
Several. You pop in, and what I'll do is, and I've got the second book going on right now. I'm about a third of the way. I write them as kind of 3-act plays. So I've got almost the entirety of the first act done. I know where the book ends in Act 3. I have no idea what's going to happen in Act 2. And neither does the main character. Because he doesn't know, I don't know. So we're going to find it. He discovers things as I discover things as he discovers them, because I don't want to forecast it through the writing. And there were a couple things that I kind of worked in there mechanically. I'm sure you noticed there were a few tropes that happened, but I did extreme right turns as they happened throughout the novel. It's one of those, okay, you see the railroad coming, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this other trope happens, which makes it very surprising. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a case of, oh, I wasn't seeing that specific thing going to happen, but I knew something was.
Yeah, I think that's what's really part that's interesting to me is, on the one hand, you want to have this kind of framework to things, but at the same time, if it's too much of a formula and stuff, people will sense that. People will really pan it and like kind of say, like, oh man, it's just another, whatever and stuff like that. And so it's like kind of, I think that's the other tension too. It's like having this structure, this body to it, but yet having surprise, having something unexpected, and that's the kind of, that's the art, I guess. It's like finding, that mix and everything. So like, how do you balance that? How do you like kind of decide what is something that like you want to kind of, apply that 3-act structure, and then other things that like you kind of like, I'm going to see where this goes. Like, I'm going to see what, be just as surprised as my character.
And it's a balance. It's one of those, a lot of times, you don't know, you never know until you actually got it on page. And then as you re-edit through, or you're walking through the pages, and you go, yep, that works, or no, that doesn't work. One of the big feedback, and beta readers are godsend if you can find good ones. The initial feedback I got was, great story. It's slow, and it is a slow-paced book, especially compared to the modern novels. It doesn't start off very fast, but I removed 2 chapters at the beginning, which were dead slow. They were excellent world building, things to that nature, but they didn't add to the story structure. And I realized that I could start the novel 40 pages deeper, and then I cut that, I put it into my bucket, and I save it for later because I can still use that somewhere else.
And then in terms of the world building and deciding like kind of how much detail, how like what do you kind of find as like kind of where it's like it at a certain point is too much in terms of like kind of detail, and then other times it's like something that like I got to keep this, this isn't something I can like cut out and stuff like that.
I start with a brevity kind of philosophy. Keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible, because there's less logical flaws, there's less consistency issues that take place. The less detail provided, the more the reader overlays their concept over the top of it, and they're like, oh, okay. And we, in the opening pages, which are available on Amazon, you got the look inside thing. You can start seeing, he talks about his jacket. I give a lot of detail in regards to that because it's important to the story. I don't give a lot of detail to Aerie because his appearance isn't important to the story. He never thinks about it because he never looks in the mirror. For that point, he's just one of those, okay, just like you and I would not describe ourselves in a story, why would he? And you got to stay within the confines of the character you're writing. Being first-person narrative makes it a lot easier. If I was doing third-person, I would have a much harder time narrowing it down to where it should be.
And then, meanwhile, as you're doing this writing, you're doing a full-time job, right? I mean, this is like kind of like, I mean, some people talk about like, oh, like I would if, I ever have the time, or like that they think about, or they dream about like, quitting a job and starting writing and stuff. But you're going to get this written.
There's 24 hours in a day. Sleep 8. Get your sleep. Sleep's essential. I got a full-time job. I got the marathon running schedule.
Right, on top of that.
I've got that, but I run them on the weekends. When at a certain point, because I don't run for time or anything like that, I use it more to maintain my endurance level. You don't have to train anymore. Your races are your training. I'm sure that if I went out and I expended more effort during the day, yes, I would absolutely get faster to that effect. I've got a master's program I'm working on right now as well. Family. And then there's all the other stuff outside of that you just got to do to keep the family happy, yourself happy. Sometimes it's just, rather than sitting down and typing, it's thinking about it. And then all of a sudden you have the insight and 6-7 pages pop out. When we were on a car ride down south this weekend, I've expanded 2 of the chapters for the next book already. Fleshed them out, and it was probably about 5-6 pages over the course of a 12-hour car trip. So you make the time work.
I find that different times what helps with like achieving different things is like when you're clear on why you're doing it. And can you talk a little bit about what kind of like it drove you to write this time around, and then like your involvement with the cause?
Oh, okay. Well, this time around, writing a novel was merely it was kind of a proof of concept idea. Can I write a novel? And then can I sell a novel? I proved to myself that I could do it, which was the big thing. I sat down and I started from start to finish, and I wrote a book, and then I went through and I did the editing process of the book, and then I went through and got covers and things to that nature. And each one's a sequential step of, okay, you add a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and they all just add up. I could do that sitting there watching TV, or I could do something else. Time. Prove to myself that I can do something, just like prove to myself that I can climb that mountain. It's all just things to prove that I'm capable. And that's really what it boiled down to.
And what was it that like kind of motivated you about kind of being involved with the Save the Veterans Life cause?
Oh, okay. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was on Rally Point, and each of my articles and white papers and things have kind of been again, that challenge to the self. I made a comment. Okay, we got into a discussion about fixing the VA. The VA government organization, and it does 3 things. It does burial benefits, it does education, and it does health. It does 2 of those three things extremely well. It does the other one. Let's not talk about how it does that, but it is in typical government efficiency. The government's very good at doing things the same way 100% of the time. So we talked about, okay, how do we fix the intrinsic problems with the VA? We got into a long discussion, and what ended up out of that was kind of a discussion post and a white paper, a fix to the VA. I ended up, along with a few others, writing about a 20-page white paper that went before a congressman, and unfortunately, I don't remember the congressman's name at this point. But the kind of the lead on that project was Colonel Michael Burrows, who is the, I believe, the VP of Sponsor of Vet Life. Great guy, great mentor, and it was just a case of my schedule did not support me getting directly involved with Sponsor of Vet Life at that point. I was writing a book, I was running marathons, I was doing all this other stuff in a full-time job. So I was like, okay, you know what? I don't need the income from the book. How can I make this work? It's roughly a veteran-themed novel. It's got military undertones. It's got themes that tie back into it. And I was like, okay, why don't I donate some of the profits from that? I wanted to set up a grant. And we had a conversation last month about how to do that. He's the expert on the organization. I just came up with an idea of, okay, let's see if we can't make this work. My proof of concept idea was, all right, all the profits from the ebook sales, all the profits from the trade paperback sales this month for Veterans Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all the way through the month, go to Sponsor of Vet Life. It's probably not going to end up being much, but I'll put a full force effort there, and whatever it is, it is. But at least we pump up awareness of that, and we get a good cause out there with a great leader, Michael Burrows, if he told me, you know what, I've got a new project, I'm collecting cans on the side of the road, I'd be right there with him collecting cans on the side of the road.
And so that's basically how you connect with him, how you got involved with stuff. And yeah, I mean, I can definitely see like kind of that, you know, he's definitely championing your efforts as well. You know, like kind of letting people know that, you know, that you basically partnered essentially and stuff. And you know, I think sometimes people do kind of like one of the things that on a past interview, a guest talked about how she felt that too often people take advantage of that, you know, like kind of Veterans Day, you know, as an excuse to have sales and that kind of thing, stuff like that, without actually giving to veterans. And I feel like you've definitely chosen to do the opposite. You know, kind of like it's directly, you know, what you're doing is directly giving to the veterans. So, you know, I know maybe it sounds a little kind of disingenuous to kind of say, you know, thanks for the veterans and stuff like that. But at the same time, I do feel like kind of it is something that like I appreciate, or I think that like, you know, people should realize that like kind of, you know, like there are still veterans who are coming back and they're, you know, like kind of they're suffering from PTSD. It's still it's something that's like it's invisible, except for the fact that like you know, every now and then something kind of happens and it ends up in the news and everything like that. But other than that, it's like kind of, you know, we're losing people like kind of, you know, daily and stuff like that. And I think it's sometimes unless we things to kind of raise awareness and to do what we can and stuff like that, it's just kind of swept under the rug and stuff. So yeah, and I guess definitely, you know, tomorrow is Veterans Day, so that's also, of course, a great time to remember, you know, the folks who, you know, have, you know, didn't make it home, or the ones that are home that like, you know, really still, back to the theme of your book, you know, they're still trying to get home and stuff. So, so with these causes, like with this and stuff, what else do you see as like kind of that you'd like to do with you know, the series with you know, like kind of you know, you're starting out, stuff like that. So what do you see as like kind of like, you know, that next level though, like if you could, you know, like kind of, I mean, right now you're still working full-time job and stuff like that. But you know, I think that's the thing, like kind of, you know, let's dream big, like, you know, like kind of right now, right here, something like that. And
Dreaming big. I'm working on kind of a side project now. It's you've got Valor Books, which is my company, a sole proprietor. It's just Valor Books is Aaron Kennedy. But Valor Books is eventually going to be the imprint that all of my books go under. And any veteran that wants to come publish, hey, they can use that. I got no problems. I'd love it for it to be military themed, but it doesn't have to be. What I'd like to do is I'm going to start up a sister company, a nonprofit or a social venture called the Whitecaps Foundation, which tied into the book theme itself. And the idea behind that is we talk a lot about the guys that come home and the things that are going on there. What I wanted to do something a little bit different with Whitecaps Foundation, which is still kind of in the works. I'm still doing the research phase at this point. We don't, outside of the USO, which goes out there and does the tours and things like that, we've got a lot of downtime when we're on ship, when we're deployed. I'd love to be able to provide books, entertainment, DVDs, things like that, so that we keep morale up. Getting a care package, whether it's baby wipes, a paperback, a magazine, Sports Illustrated, or whatever, in a thing, is a huge boost. Mail Day was a massive thing for the guys like you and me who've been on ship for extended period. It's like, oh wow, somebody cares, and it doesn't matter if it's junk mail. Somebody cared. Hey, you got mail. What I'd like to do is with the Whitecaps Foundation is one, I'm looking at seeing how we can partner with other the guys that do care packages and get books into that from the indie authors. Folks that are looking at it, or remaindered books, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, the big, your retail brick and mortar stores, they throw away books. They get pulped and things like that. We can try to work with somebody like that and go, okay, what are you going to do with these remaindered books? Why don't we write them off and send them overseas in these care packages?
Wow.
That's one thing. Unit libraries is another thing that's tied into there. And my initial goal is I'd love to get persona non grata in each of the 600 ships the Navy has, our 25 Marine regiments, and each of the battalion libraries that are out there, and then work towards the Army, which is massive, and I can't even tell you how big their unit libraries are or whatnot. But with a unit library system, you just send them a book, they shove it on the ship, and if somebody wants to read it, they read it. You put a stamp in and go, hey, if you like it, write a review or whatnot. But for the indie authors, that's a great thing, because you got these guys that are handing off these books because they just want anything to keep their mind engaged when they're overseas. Or back stateside, rather than going out drinking every night, which I did as a young troop.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about the care packages, and at different times, like you said, just having that sense that somebody still remembers you, even if, like you said, even if it's the junk mail, stuff like that. But really, wouldn't that be awesome to have kind of like this core authors, like indie authors who are military, saying, hey, shipmate, kind of, you're not forgotten and stuff. We're rooting for you to kind of get back home and stuff. And yeah, I think that's fantastic. So what's like the best way for folks to learn more about what's going on, Aaron, and then kind of stay in touch with you and kind of keep on top of what's going on with the Ships of Valor?
I'm on the website itself, shipsofvalorbooks.com. I maintain a blog. I try to over inundate people with information. Every couple of days, I write a blog post. I made sure to highlight that I was going to be here tonight. I did that yesterday. Not that I have many followers, but if they go there, they can see it. I do Facebook. Persona Non Grata's got its own page. I've got my personal send me a Facebook request. Anybody can. I don't mind. In the back of the book, it's got my personal email. Send me an email. If you hate the book, tell me you hate the book and why. Call me dirty names. But at least you can vent to somebody. Tell me what you like about it. We'll go from there. If you just want to talk to somebody at a marathon, come tell me you're going to be at such and such marathon, and friggin' if I happen to be there, we'll meet up at friggin' the home friggin' flag, and we'll go from there. I try to make myself as accessible as possible. If they want to know what's going on with the ships, I'll try not to spoil anything, other than, okay, I'm about this far in, done with the book and there. But that's kind of what I got.
That's awesome, Aaron. Some time with you, and really look forward to kind of seeing the progress and journey with the Ships of Valor, with yourself as an author. So yeah, thanks again for coming by, and definitely I look forward to sharing more details about the different things going on with you in the show notes.
All right, thank you very much, John.